Warning, today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Then Is Now podcast. I am your host, Rigor. In this series of special Then Is Now episodes, 13 Days of Hallowtober, we are exploring what are widely regarded as the scariest movies of all time. Joining me today is Patrick Rahall, a.k.a. Patsy the Angry Nerd. He's the award-winning host of the Throwdown Thursday podcast, Shark Bites podcast, and The Loudest Sports Show, as well as author of How Much Do You Tip an Exorcist?, a contributing author to More Lore from the Mythos, Volumes 1 and 2, and contributing author to VHS Nightmares, coming out October 31st. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to discuss our subject matter.
Excellent, excellent. Our subject matter, of course, is the film The Thing from 1982, often called John Carpenter's remake of Howard Hawks' The Thing from Another World from 1951, but it's more of a reinterpretation of the original novella Who Goes There, written by John Campbell in 1938.
"100,000 years ago, it found its way into our galaxy. Trapped in the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, it could not escape. Now the men of Station 4 have made a monumental discovery. An alien creature had frozen, but not to death. Is the warmest place to hide.
So without further ado, I will give you the synopsis of the film. In Antarctica, a Norwegian helicopter pursues a sled dog to an American research station. The Americans witness the Norwegian passenger accidentally blow up the helicopter and himself. The Norwegian pilot fires a rifle and shouts at the Americans, but they cannot understand him as he is shot dead in self-defense by Station Commander Gary. The American helicopter pilot, R.J. McCready, and Dr. Copper leave to investigate the Norwegian base. Among the charred ruins and frozen corpses, they find the burned remains of a malformed humanoid which they recover to the American station. Their biologist, Blair, performs autopsies on the remains and finds a normal set of human organs. Clark, the base's dog handler, kennels the new sled dog, and it soon morphs into a creature and absorbs the other station dogs. The disturbance alerts the team, and Mac insists that Childs use a flamethrower to incinerate the creature. Blair autopsies the new creature and learns that it can perfectly imitate other organisms. Recovered Norwegian data leads the Americans to a large excavation site containing a partially buried alien spacecraft and a smaller human-sized dig site. Norris estimates that the alien ship has been buried for at least 100,000 years. Blair grows paranoid that the creature could assimilate all life on Earth in a matter of years. The station implements controls to reduce the risk of assimilation. From here, it becomes a claustrophobic whodunit as everyone suspects each other of being assimilated, and they must work together in order to survive and prevent the thing from reaching the civilized world. So, Patrick, when did you first see this movie, and what was your first impression?
I only saw this movie recently within the last few years because I'd never seen it. It was just one of those things that somehow had never crossed my radar, which one of those things that I very much regret because this is something that I wish I had seen as a kid. And it's watching it for the first time. Like, I knew that there were really good special effects, and I knew that the people involved had really done a lot of hard work. Like, Rob Bottin is just phenomenal, and he is somehow never credited with one of the greatest werewolf transformations of all time in The Howling, because it often gets overshadowed by Rick Baker's work on American Werewolf in London. But Rob Bottin's work in The Thing, he did all of the special effects with the exception of the dog thing, which was done by Stan Winston, but Stan Winston didn't want to put his name on the film because he was, obviously much more well-known, and, he didn't want to overshadow the work that Rob had done, because Rob was working, 22 hours a day, 7 days a week, just, fabricating all these incredible effects. Which
to this day they have yet to be eclipsed.
Often imitated, but never ever duplicated. We even saw an homage to it in the second half of It Chapter 2 with young Stan Uris.
Head. Which part?
When they go to the house and they see Stanley Uris's head pop out of the refrigerator.
That's right.
And it sprouts legs and runs around.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, well, I saw this movie in the theater when it first came out in 1982. I was with my mother and my grandmother, and my grandmother pretty much laughed through the film. Nothing jaded her except maybe the Amityville movie. That scared her. My mother hid under her coat through the whole movie. And for me, I was 12 years old. I was mesmerized. And this was the first horror film that I wasn't scared at. And instead, it was like I was just caught in this abject rapture at the amazing spectacle that was unfolding before my eyes, And I just fell in love with this movie since the first time I saw it, and I've watched it many, many times since then.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, since I've seen it, like I've made sure to show it to my brothers. I watched it with my wife, and I have multiple versions of it. I have the DVD, then I got the Blu-ray, and then I got the special Shout Factory Blu-ray. Like, I have it on digital. Like, I've got so many versions because just in case something happens to one, I have some backups, because this is one of those movies you can just throw on at any time. I recently did an interview with someone, and she travels all over the world, and the first time she saw The Thing, she had traveled with her family to Antarctica. And they were watching it on a boat just offshore. And it's like, that's the most perfect place I could think of to watch this movie. I love films like this because they're so it's the isolation that really ratchets up the terror. Like being at the bottom of the ocean, like in the abyss, or being out in space, like with Alien, or name a movie. It's the isolation, knowing that you are the last line of defense and no one is coming to help you, so it's all on you. Right,
exactly. And that's just the charm of this movie. It's that claustrophobic feel, that, and like you said, that's it. If this thing gets out, no pun intended, forget it. It's over for the world. They even show, what's his name? Was it Blair? Had the computer simulation that basically said, okay, if this thing gets out and starts to assimilate, this is how long it'll take to assimilate the entire population. And it wasn't very long. I think it was a matter of weeks to months that would take over the world.
Yeah, it was one of those, and you would never know. Like, this isn't like, oh, I'm pretty sure that guy's a zombie because he got bitten. It was, you have no clue who is a thing. And I think that's really the masterful stroke of this story is, even if you have, 5 people in a room and 2 of them are the thing, each one of those is going to act independently and might turn on the other, because each, as we learn, each individual cell of this thing will fight to defend itself. Hence the blood test.
Right. And when you go, upon repeated viewing, there are some clues as to who may or may not be the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like Norris, was it? Yeah, it was Norris was the one who gets his chest broken open, which we'll talk about at a later point. There's a moment where they say, well, let's put Norris in charge. And he's like, no, I don't feel up to it. And it's not unless you go back and watch it and that he probably, because he knows he's not going to want to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Because he really doesn't in the nuances that everyone else does, even though he's assimilated him. And there was another one earlier, actually, with the same character. There's a scene where the dog that comes to the base is walking through, just kind of looking around. We don't know the dog is the thing at that point, and he goes into a room, and there's a shadow of someone sitting on the bed. And the dog walks in, and the person pets him. And if you look at it, it's Norris's shadow. You can tell by his hair. He's the only one that had that kind of hair. So.
I will push back on that just a little bit, only because that was one of those scenes, from what I've heard of different breakdowns, it wasn't anyone from the cast that they used. Like, Carpenter made it specifically ambiguous, so it's like, oh, it could be this guy, but like he just used somebody from the crew and had, and used their silhouette to really keep it ambiguous, which I thought was phenomenal.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's,
oh, wow. Okay. All right. You learn something new every day.
I've watched so many of like the really deep, in-depth breakdowns. Like, well, if he was a thing, why did he have a heart attack? Well, because the thing replicates you perfectly, and if it replicates a bad heart, it could still give out.
And you know what's funny is it wasn't until I was doing research for this particular episode that I actually knew what the characters' roles were, with the exception of, obviously the doctors and McCready and Knowles. It was the chef. It was hard to tell. Maybe Winders, okay, he was the radio guy. It was hard to tell like who was who set up and playing with each character. But first, let's talk about, of course, the director John Carpenter.
Yes,
there's so many people on the show that we've talked about that we could do entire episodes all about, and Carpenter is one of those. He's done everything. I'm just going to give you the short list here to the audience. Assault on Precinct 13, Escape from New York, Halloween, The Fog, Vampires, Prince of Darkness. I mean, I don't know what I can say except that this guy's career has been a huge influence on my own life.
Yeah, he's just so successful. And what a lot of folks don't realize, like, oh, yeah, I know he directed this and I know he did that. He also does a lot of the music for his films as well, which is why I was, because he's very synth heavy, like, the Halloween theme and stuff like that, which is why I was very surprised to find out that he did not score this film. It was Academy Award winner Ennio Morricone who scored this film.
Right. Absolutely, yeah.
And
I wonder if he just either was too busy because it was such a special effects intensive film that he needed to oversee things, or what was his reasoning? Do you know?
I don't know, but it's probably because this was such a very heavy shoot. Like, there was a lot going on in a tight window, and everything had to be done really well. Like, these effects, like, they didn't have a chance to make 4 or 5 or 6 of these things, so every shot, like the Norris head, that whole sequence, the defibrillator, the arms, the head, like, and the fire going on in the background, all of that had to be done right the first time, because they didn't have extras of these things. Like, the budget was tight. I have had the chance to chat with Tommy Waits on multiple occasions, and who played Windows, and it was just like, it was the most fun film he's ever worked on. Like, it was just a nonstop party with Kurt Russell and all these guys. I will say that one thing about this film that you will not get from anything else, it's Wilford Brimley without a mustache. That's a very rare sighting.
Yes. And without the diabetes.
Yes. I love the cast. I love the way they interact with each other. Somebody on Facebook the other day...
they have good chemistry.
Yeah. somebody on Facebook the other day had a post where it was like, describe your favorite movie, but make it boring. And it's like, a group of researchers in Antarctica play Guess Who. Like, which is
That's
pretty
great.
accurate, I think.
So let's move on a little bit. I mean, we could sing Carpenter's praises all year long, and we'll keep touching back on him through the film. The screenplay was written by Bill Lancaster, and when I did research on him, he had a short career as an actor and a screenwriter, but before writing not only all of the original Bad News Bears films, but the TV series of the same name from the late 70s. So I thought that was really interesting that he went from the Bad News Bears to The Thing.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the career trajectory of William Friedkin, who wrote The Exorcist, because he was being typecast because he wrote all the Pink Panther movies, and he's like, well, I don't want people to think I'm a one-note pony or a one-trick pony. Let me let me write something a little darker, and he wrote The Exorcist.
Right.
Which is so it's kind of the same thing with Lancaster.
Well, Blatty, who wrote the novel, did the script, but Friedkin had
I always
huge hand in that.
Yeah, I always do that. I always say Friedkin. It was William Peter Blatty. Sorry, I got my wires crossed there.
All right, so now, first of all, this film, we had mentioned we'd talk about the characters, and it's chock full of character actors. There's so many of them in this film. And again, this would take us hours if we really did a deep dive. But let's start off with the star, who really is a star. He's not much of a character actor. He's a major star. It's Kurt Russell, who plays R.J. Mac McCready. He's the helicopter pilot at the base. He's got such an amazing career, like I said, that we're going to have to do a full episode on him in the future. Now, I remember seeing him as a kid in Lost in Space and Gilligan's Island. He had a role in an episode of each of those shows, as well as playing the character Dexter Riley in 3 Disney movies, which was The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Now You See Him, Now You Don't, and The Strongest Man in the World. And I just recently actually caught The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes on Disney Plus, and I remembered him, and I remembered the movie, and it was not a great movie, but I remembered Kurt Russell, growing up, watching him grow up. And then, of course, I mean, his film career, again, I'm just going to throw out a short list here, but, you got Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, Tango and Cash, The Mean Season, Overboard, Stargate, Sky High, and Death Proof. But I think the movie that put him on the map as a solid actor was a TV movie. It was the Elvis Presley biopic called Elvis, also directed by John Carpenter. And I think that's kind of where they really started to get together and do projects like, Escape from New York and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hadn't known much about him. I'm like, I had known who he was, but my taste in movies has evolved over time. I knew Kurt Russell from films like Soldier, and there was another one where he was Breakdown, I think it was called, with Jack Noseworthy from Event Horizon.
Oh yeah,
like that's what I knew him from. And like in Breakdown, he's not a badass. Also what's the other one? He's not a bad executive decision.
Yeah,
the one where they kill Seagal the first 5 minutes of the movie. So
5 minutes.
Yeah, I didn't know he was like this badass guy because I hadn't really seen him. When I saw Soldier, I saw that after the other movies. I'm like, oh, it's so nice that they're giving this guy some badass roles, not knowing that he was The Thing and Jack Burton and Snake Plissken.
Right. Yeah.
So my introduction was a little different. I kind of went the opposite direction. But
that's funny.
But yeah,
and it's so funny too when you show pictures of him when he was younger to people, and that you're like, "Who's that?" And like, "Oh, wait, is that Kurt Russell?"
Yeah. The thing that I like though is the fact that they, because I've read the book that this is based on, because I'm like, oh, this is so great, I got to read the book that it's based on. And there are a lot of times when you read the book that the movie is based on, and you're like, well, that's kind of disappointing. The movie is so much better. Anytime you hear somebody say the book is better, that's like a 50-50
right.
thing. Kurt Russell's character, R.J. McCready, is described as, in one paragraph, I think they used the word 6 or 7 times, bronze. He had a bronze beard, and he was bronze. It's like, get a thesaurus. You can use a different word to describe him. Like,
what is he, Doc Savage?
right? It was just over and over. It's like his hair was bronze and his beard was bronze. His knuckles were bronze. It's like, what? Can we come up with something else? I'm sure there are other descriptors. But,
right.
Yeah,
Now, it's interesting in this movie. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I also consider this one of the greatest sequels of all time. Not because of the movie from the 50s, but because in 2011 they made a prequel, thus retroactively making this a sequel. So I consider it one of the greatest sequels of all time, right up there with Terminator 2 and Empire Strikes Back.
Aliens,
yep.
Yeah. Yes, and we'll briefly talk about that other one towards the end of the show here. But one thing I wanted to say about the characters in this movie too is not only do they all have good chemistry with each other, the actors, Carpenter doesn't waste any time with the story. We don't need to know their backstories, and we don't need to know a whole heck of a lot about these characters because it's evident in their actions and how they respond to things what kind of a character they are. You don't need to know in-depth details about their lives, in order to enjoy this movie.
Right. There's not a lot of ham-handed exposition. It's like, who's the doctor? The guy we call Doc. Like, who's in charge?
Right.
Like, that Gary's in charge because he's the guy who kind of steps up at the very beginning. And it's too bad that nobody spoke Norwegian, because if you speak Norwegian, the beginning of the movie is ruined for you because of what he says. And, Keith David just being Keith David. I remember seeing this the first time, and I see T.K. Carter as Knowles, and I'm like, that was the guy who played the mentor on Punky Brewster. Like, that's what I knew him from. And he's just zooming around on his roller skates, which was awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody does such a great job. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's and you can tell that it's not just the mistrust that they have of each other. Is like some of these guys know that, like, well, I'm more important, so I'm higher up in the hierarchy. Like McCready knows that, I'm the chopper pilot, I'm super important, so I can kind of get away with stuff that not everybody else is going to get away with. Like, he has his own sleeping quarters, his own shack. So he's able to do a little more, and he has a little bit of that, entitled attitude that maybe somebody like Windows doesn't have, or, Child's having to share a room with Palmer. I mean, they make the best of it, but,
Right. And, all the actors are so good. I mean, Keith David, who played Childs, by the way, he's the mechanic on the bass. He is just one of those actors that I have loved for so long. He's just been, like you said, when you saw T.K. Carter in Punky Brewster, you're like, oh my God, it's Knowles. And when I see him, I'm like, oh my God, it's Childs, He was in They Live, of course, with John Carpenter's film They Live. He was a general in Armageddon. Recently, and I recognize his voice, recently in the past, 5 or 6 years, he was the voice of Solivar on the Flash TV series, which was one of the Gorillas and part of the whole, Gorilla City storyline. And he's done so many episodes of shows and movies that we couldn't really list them all here. But the one I remember him from was he was on an episode of Highlander, and that blew me away because I love that show and I loved him. And I was like, oh man, he needs to be on here more often, not just one episode.
Yeah. He's also the president on Rick and Morty, which is where some folks might recognize him from.
There you go.
Because I've had people like, oh, that guy sounds familiar. Wasn't he on Rick and Morty? And like a buddy of mine recognized Werner Herzog the same way. It's like, hey, that guy from The Mandalorian, like, has he been in anything else? Has he done anything else? It's like, oh, yes. But he also was on Rick and Morty, so that's where you know him.
And it's funny, I'm really good with voices, but shame on me, I did not know until very recently that Clancy Brown is the voice of Mr. Krabs on SpongeBob SquarePants.
Right?
So shame on me for not knowing that.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really sound like you. Usually he sounds like he does when he plays Surtur in Thor Ragnarok.
That's true, yeah. So, all right, so we talked about Wilford Brimley. He plays Blair, who's the senior biologist. And, of course, the one movie I always remembered him from, aside from the diabetes commercials, was the movie Cocoon.
Yep.
And his famous line was, we won't get any older and we won't ever die. And it's just always stuck in my head.
Brian Dennehy and Don Amici.
Right.
Yep.
Great movie. We mentioned T.K. Carter, Palmer. He's the pot-smoking assistant mechanic at the base, and he's been in a lot of stuff, but it's not a lot of stuff that I've watched, except I do remember seeing him in an episode of The Human Target quite a while ago. And again, it's like every time these actors pop up, you jump up out of your chair, you're like, oh my god, that's so-and-so from The Thing, you know?
Yeah, like you see somebody,
and then...
I was going to say Richard Masur.
Yes. Mazer. I don't know, I always said Mazer.
My brother and I were arguing over something. It's like, oh, he's the guy from this movie. I'm like, no, he's not. I'm like, yeah, he is. Like the same guy, because I showed The Thing to my brothers, and they're like, I'm telling you, that's the same guy. He played this. I'm like, there's no way. And it's like, oh, that was him. Like, that's so weird. Like, I didn't. And I'm trying to remember what it was, but like he told me.
Like, a couple of films he was in was License to Drive and Risky Business. And the one I remembered recognizing him on TV was he was in the original It miniseries.
Yeah, Stanley Uris. That's what my brother had mentioned. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's like, yeah, that's the guy from It. I'm like, what? No. And he's like, yeah. I'm like,
That's too funny.
Interesting.
You know, Richard Dysart plays Doc Copper. He's one of those guys that has a very distinct voice. In fact, I always thought he did cartoon voices, and he has done voices on the Batman animated series, but I thought he did older cartoons, but he didn't, but he does have that distinct voice. He plays Doc Copper.
Yeah, and poor Doc Copper. He had a he had a rough go of it. I loved the way they did his big scene, like the way, and if we get into it, we get into it, but I was a fan. And that's the thing with these horror movies, these scary movies, is there's so many times that they try to outdo each other with the death scenes, and it's tough to outdo that one.
Yeah, exactly. It's just intense how you just don't expect it, and when you're first watching the movie, you're just thinking, oh, well, either the guy's going to die or he's going to live. You don't expect his chest to burst open and giant teeth to chop off the doctor's arms and the head to stretch off.
Oh yeah, and
the table and spider legs.
Yeah, like that's one of the greatest. And Palmer's reaction to that is absolutely perfect, because I think that's how any of us would react to that.
Right. And didn't they use that line in It Part 2?
Yeah, the same thing. I was like, yep. I'm like, oh, that's definitely an homage to It. And then he says it, and it's like, yep, 100%.
So just to quickly go over a couple of the other actors in the show, we got Peter Maloney played Bennings. He was the meteorologist. We mentioned Richard Mazer. He was Clark the dog handler. Hallahan played Norris. And the one thing I remember about him wasn't necessarily something that he was in, but he said that no matter where he went in the world, somebody would recognize him from The Thing. And he just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. Like, he totally did not expect from just doing that one movie that people would recognize him all the time. You got Donald Moffat, who plays Gary. I remember him from Clear and Present Danger. And he also played the taxman in the Robin Williams film Popeye.
Yep.
Which was a really funny movie.
He's played two presidents.
I tried looking it up because I thought he did. He is impressive. I thought he had played this role that I'm about to mention, but he never has. I think he could have played Stan Laurel in an Laurel and Hardy movie, because he looks just like him.
I agree. No, I had said I do agree that he's impressive, but I said he played two presidents because he was President Bennett in Clear and Present Danger, but he also played Lyndon Johnson in The Right Stuff.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, these character actors are just so amazing, and they're in so many different things. I have a book. It's called Names You'll Never Remember with Faces You'll Never Forget. And it's just so true, It's like, oh, that guy. Who's that guy?
Well, it's like Tommy Waits in, was in The Warriors. One of my all-time favorite films.
Yep. That's right. That's the one I was going to mention that I remember him from as well. And, of course, it was reversed. Like, I guess I probably saw The Warriors after I saw The Thing, but I recognized him. It wasn't the other way around. I didn't recognize him in The Thing from The Warriors. I recognized him in The Warriors from The Thing.
See, for me, it's the other way around, because I've been watching The Warriors since I was, 11. Because it's one of my dad's favorite movies. Like, we played in the city to introduce my side of the wedding party. when I got married. So
That's awesome.
it's been a bit of an influential film for us. So I was like, and my brothers, of course, I didn't tell them he was in it, but I was like, oh, watch this guy. And like, oh my God, it's Fox.
That's hilarious, man.
We'll return to 13 Days of Hallowtober after these messages.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil. And our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't. Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classic and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival. Classic monsters, modern talk, and the head of Rondo Hatton, only on Monster Kid Radio.
Oh man! So the scene, the big scene in the movie. I mean, well, first of all, when you first watch this and the dog walks in, like how much going into this movie did you know beforehand?
Very little. Like I remember watching it for the first time. I'm like, oh, what a bunch of jerks shooting at a dog! Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, oh, I hope you die. I hope your helicopter explodes. And then it did. I was like, oh. I didn't mean it. But no, like I knew very little. Like I knew it was like an alien that assimilated people, and like that was the extent of my knowledge. Like I think the first time I saw this was a friend of mine had done like an outdoor movie night, and this was one of the movies. And I remember watching it like outside on a projector screen, and I was like, "Oh my god, I have to own this movie." And I think at the time I did, but it was one of those like I hadn't ever watched it because I bought a bunch of movies that were cheap, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a classic. I'll buy this. This is a classic. I'll buy this." You know, like I had They Live, which I had never seen. I owned for about 15 years and had never even like. I'd look at it and be like, maybe later. I like Roddy Piper, but how good of an actor can he be? Turns out, pretty damn good.
Right.
And I think the thing that got me to watch it was the fact that they had redone, scene for scene, they recreated that fight scene on South Park with a couple of the handicapped kids. And it is scene for scene, everything that they do, like up to the point where it's like, put on the glasses or start eating the trash can. Like, oh. But he was like, put on the hat. Put on the hat, Jimmy. Oh, it was great.
That's so funny. And, not to get on a tangent, but that scene in They Live is perhaps, even though it can come across, especially out of context, as being ridiculous because the fight just goes on and nobody could either, hitting a skull is like hitting a wall, first of all, and then taking a punch is a whole other thing. But that scene is the most important part of that movie because Roddy Piper has to convince Keith David to put the damn glasses on and see for himself what's going on. And it's critical to the movie, and I just love how it's done.
Oh yeah, it's well done. And again, it's not really a tangent if we're talking about a Carpenter film with Keith
true.
David. So I mean, it's still connected. It's a testament to the skill that Carpenter has for creating a scene and framing a scene, because like with that one, you're watching every single detail, as opposed to certain scenes in The Thing where you have to go back and rewatch it. It's like, wait, who was in the room when this happened? Where was that guy? Did I hear keys fall on the floor? What's going on in this scene?
Right.
Like, because there is a point when you're like, who had the keys? Well, I had the keys and he had the keys, but like no one else could do it. Like, so who unlocked the fridge and sabotaged all the blood?
And that's one of those mysteries that I have yet to solve. I still cannot figure out who could have done that.
I believe it was, hold on, I have to remember his name, Fuchs. I believe it was Fuchs, the redhead, who was, because when he is in
with
the
glasses?
room, yeah, like they find him outside and he's partially transformed.
And he burnt himself before it would get to him.
Yeah, they throw gas on him and they hit him with the flare, I think.
Wait a minute, I think we're confusing two characters. No, Fuchs is the one with the glasses. The redheaded guy is hold on, I gotta cheat. I got the thing wiki open. Bennings, thank you.
Yeah, it's Bennings, because he's got the coat and they're chasing him outside. But he had the keys because when I think Windows had the keys or somebody had the keys, and they go in that room where they have the body, and you hear the keys fall on the floor. So anybody could have picked it up.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But it's not something I had noticed. It was something that somebody who did a YouTube video about it noticed, and I am like, oh, well, that makes sense.
The reason, though, I ruled out Bennings was because it appeared, or at least it appeared, that he did be until the corpse, or whatever you want to call it, the body that they had in the storage room had gotten to him. Because remember, he's like sitting on the chair, and all the tentacles are kind of pulling around him, and
that's when the keys were dropped. Because Windows, I think it was Windows who walked in there and saw him, and Windows dropped the keys. So then it might have been Norris, because Norris was right there with him. Right.
So it could have been Norris who did it then.
Yeah. And before they could do, I'm gonna have to rewatch this again now because.
I know. Oh, too bad.
I know, and now it's like, wait a minute, when did that happen exactly? Like, I'm going to have to turn the volume up. But yeah, I know he had the keys because he was supposed to lock up, and when he saw Bennings getting assimilated, it freaked him out, and he drops the keys. Like, you can't see it, but you hear the keys hit the ground.
Right, okay. All right, that makes sense. That's, a 30-year mystery finally solved.
Oh, yeah, we're coming up on the 40th anniversary.
What I was getting to earlier, what'd you say?
I said we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the thing.
I know. Oh, geez, 40. Wow, I misspoke. So what I was getting at earlier was the dog. When the dog first is introduced into the kennel, did you expect what was going to happen when its head burst open?
No, when I saw... Like, I had no clue what was about to happen. Like, I was the same as you at 12 watching this in the theater for the first time. Because I was like, oh, the dog's going to do something. What's going to happen? And then to watch its head split open and, like, the other dog's trying to chew through the wire to get out. And it's like, oh, man, like, that's crazy. Like, that's so what? Like, and you can't look
instead
away.
of being scared, I was enthralled. I was like, oh my God, I need to see more.
Yeah, it's oh man, like, and you think like, oh, there's no way they can top this, and then you see like 5 minutes later this huge conglomeration of like all these sled dogs, and it's like, what is
right?
And like, how are they going to top that?
Oh, and some of what comes out of it is like a plant type creature, the one that comes at Child's right before he blows the flamethrower. It looks like a plant, and then there's like a giant eyeball, and
yeah, it's like, it's so cool. It's so cool. Like, first of all, to come up with like this design, like this is what I want this creature to look like,
right.
And then to put it into, like, to make it real. Like, those are two completely, it's like, we want you to, you know, come up with this crazy monster thing. And it's like, all right, I'll come up with a crazy monster. And then it's like, okay, now you've come up with this, you know, really elaborate, you know, this thing, for lack of a better term. Now make it real. And it has to move around and fill it with animatronics and also do some other crazy stuff with it.
Right. And that whole scene is just so good. I mean, from one of the dogs literally biting the chain link fence and ripping it apart. That's how scared the dog was to get out. It was ripping the chain link fence with his teeth. To one of the best horror movie lines ever, because usually people in horror movies they're stupid. They go down the basement, they split up and all that. And the line in this movie that makes it work, and it's really what sold it for me, like 100%, was when what's his name? Bennings goes up to Charles. He goes, Mac wants the flamethrower. You heard him. Now get moving. It's like, all right, this is cool. We're not going to run. We're not going to hide. We're going to go get the flamethrower and face this thing head on.
Well, I mean, you know, you look at something like that, and like if a bear is coming at you, okay, I have a gun. A bear is coming at me. Let me shoot it in the face or the leg or something that will stop it from attacking me. When you see this dog thing, which is what they call it, where do you shoot that? Like, I don't know where I'm supposed to shoot this, but fire will solve all problems.
They did give the dogs that hadn't fully been assimilated like mercy killings, which I thought was kind of good.
Yeah, I think.
And
what's
poor
his
Clark
name?
was not too happy about that.
No, didn't Wilford Brimley went through and killed all the rest of the dogs, didn't he? Because he was so concerned about it getting away.
Yes, because I remember the axe, but when the creature was assimilating him, there was one that was kind of strangled in the tentacles, and because I remember the blood squib coming off of the dog's chest, and it was like howling, and because it was sort of a mercy kill, you know, at least on that one.
Yeah.
But then you know, we've got a lot of this stuff going on. They've gone to the Norwegian base. They've brought it back and all that. They figured out that something can assimilate you, and then we get to. Now the paranoia breaks out. Nobody can trust anyone. They don't know who could be a thing and who couldn't be. But, you know, like Kurt Russell says, or McCready says, if you are all with things, you'd all attack me now. So some of you are human too. And I think that whole momentum of the film is it's just so intense that it just works 100%.
Yeah, like, because you don't know who is who, like, that's why I liked the blood test so much. Especially the scene.
A terrifying scene.
The scene leading up to that, when they have like the you know, like oh, we found, you know, shredded long johns with McCready's name on them, because, you know, they had learned that like when the thing assimilates you, it tears through your clothes, and so it's like they're setting it up to make you think that McCready is a thing. And he comes back in from outside, and he's got the dynamite. You know, it's like, you're not going to shoot me because I have dynamite. Like,
right.
And he's able to get the upper hand. And that line when he's like, "First, I'll show you what I already know," and like superheats the thing and stick the paper clip or whatever, the little piece of metal, and sticks it into his own blood. Like, see, I'm human. And like, then they check the other guy. He's like, "Oh, you killed that guy too. Like, what do you think about that?" And McCready just doesn't even.
That makes you a murderer.
Yeah, McCready doesn't even like bat an eye. He's just like, "Yep," and next guy.
Right. And it's funny because when McCready does his blood first, Childs is like, "Yeah, it's a crock of shit."
Yeah, he thinks that for a couple of minutes. Eventually, he changes his tune just a little bit.
Right. But it's just before that scene and just after the scene where McCready comes in with the dynamite, Knowles gets bumped into the wall or to the shelving unit and has a heart attack. And that's that whole scene that we started to talk about where, Doc Hopper jumps on him with the paddles. Boom, boom, 1, 2, 3, right through the chest. I just remember there's so much about that scene that blew me away. Not just breaking through the chest, which was a shock to begin with, and then the teeth was another thing on top of it. But then it starts to grow out of it with Norris's face on it. And then Norris's head is stretching, trying to get away. I mean, it's like we established, every single cell in this thing is alive, and they all share the same consciousness. So this thing is thick in, and I think it really thought it had a chance getting away as a head with spider legs.
And that effect, watching the multi-segmented insectile legs pop out of this thing, and 2 eyes pop up, and it's running, and it's the upside down head with this grimace of death on it as it's skittering away. And the line from Palmer,
give us the line.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. He turns around and it's just, and McCready turns around and it's like, watching this thing and it's just like, burn it. And oh yeah, it's...
And what's great about that line is not only did it break the tension and the terror from what we just saw, but it's probably most likely what the audience was thinking when they saw it too. He just verbalized it.
Maybe the actor hadn't seen the effect yet, and Carpenter just wanted an honest reaction from him.
That could be, yeah.
That would have been great. And he looked, it's like, what is this? Oh.
And if we back up just a little bit, just before the spider legs grow out of Norris's head, there's the scene where the head is, separated itself from the body, dropped to the floor, and the tongue lashes out like a whip with an awesome sound effect that sounds just like a whip. It's like, and then it pulls
itself
across the room by its tongue.
And it's trying to sneak away while the head is up on this I don't know, I don't even know what you would call it. It's almost like a weird umbilicus, that's coming up from the neck, and poor Doc Hopper's got his arms bitten off. The way they did that scene was amazing. They had fake arms that were made out of gelatin and fake blood and latex, and they had a guy who was a double amputee, and they put the arms on him, and they put a mask that kind of looked like Doc Hopper. I was trying to think of his Dysart.
Oh, Richard Dysart, yeah.
They were trying to, that kind of looked like him, and at the camera angle, it looks like him screaming in pain, but it's a mask on a totally different guy. But you're not paying attention to that. You're paying attention to his arms. You're looking at his arms because that's the focal point, and you're looking at these chomping jaws that used to be the chest. It's so cool. I love it.
It really is, and I think it's a scene that has yet to be surpassed in any kind of movie, because the computer effects today are not going to do it justice. Well, there are some movies that will use practical effects and have computer effects enhance them, which I think is the way it should be, not just completely making a monster, in the computer.
Oh, agreed. We talked a little bit about the prequel that came out, and there are a couple of scenes that I think had to be done completely through CGI effects. When the guy's head splits open in the helicopter and tentacles shoot out of it across the room. that might be a little difficult to do,
Right.
with a practical effect.
Yeah.
But there were things that were done by Amalgamated Dynamics that, like, they made the practical effects, and then the studio was like, nope, we're doing all CGI. It's like, yeah, but these effects look worse than the movie that came out 30 years ago.
Right. And, it was, I've said this before in the show. Roger Ebert once said that stop motion effects look fake but feel real. Computer generated effects look real but feel fake. And I think that's just so true.
And that's only if you have really good computer effects, because there are a lot of computer effects that, the first one that comes to mind is The Mummy Returns with The Rock's face on the Scorpion King, where he's a giant scorpion. That doesn't look real at all. It doesn't feel real at all.
Right.
If you have good CGI, like in, say, like the Marvel movies, yeah, that looks great. Then you turn around and, like, you look at, we have to CGI Henry Cavill's mustache off, and it looks terrible. Like, how do you go from one extreme to the other with such a massive budget and people who have been doing this forever? I don't know.
Right.
It's supposed to be,
Who
getting
knows?
better as the technology progresses, but, like, again, you look at stuff like this, and it's like, oh, like this holds up today. Like, I showed this to my brothers
Absolutely.
last December, and I was like, check this, and not even last December, earlier this year, before everything happened. And I was like, what do you think about these effects? And they're like, that looks amazing. Like, that's, like, I'm glad it's not CGI. Like, and so many people say that because that's without knowing all the work that went into it, like the physical work.
Oh yeah, it's just incredible. So let's we're kind of getting over time here. Let's briefly talk about the prequel, which came out in 2011, and a couple of issues that I have with it. First of all, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought that the attention to detail to making it about the Norwegian base back in 1982 was spot on. What I don't understand is, first of all, why did they call it The Thing? Again, because they're so referenced as a remake when in fact it's a prequel. And second, if they were going to call it The Thing, why didn't they just call it The Thing, the Norwegian base, as a subtitle under it?
Yeah, like that.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I didn't understand that either. It's like, if you're making a prequel for something, you don't call it the same thing. I suppose. See, I mean, you can't, like, you can't make a prequel to Rocky and call it Rocky. It's
right.
I mean, there's already and you can't call it, like, The Thing 2. Like, it's a prequel. Call it the fifth. Like, not the full word. Just part of it.
Just call it The.
Yeah. Or just
you
call
can't
it
make a sequel to Halloween and call it Halloween.
Oh yeah, imagine that.
Oh wait.
But yeah, I totally get it. It makes sense that it's like, we want you to know that this is what this is. But I totally agree with you. Like, call it like the Norwegian base or something, or Outpost whatever, because it's Outpost 31. I actually have a shirt that says McCready's Pest Control Outpost 31.
Nice.
But they, call it, The Thing Outpost, whatever outpost it was, 17 or 22 or what I don't even remember what it was. But I also did enjoy it. I really like Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I thought some of the death scenes were pretty cool, like Christopher Highview. I can never pronounce his last name correctly, but the guy who played Tormund in Game of Thrones, his death scene was amazing. Some of the stuff that we got to see in the original, the 1982 film, normally it's like, I don't care about, like, how we got to this point, but, like, when they went and examined the base and you saw, like, the two-faced screaming burnt corpse, or the guy who had killed himself and his blood froze, right, that was kind of cool. I mean, I didn't need to see the guy go and like slit his wrist to understand what had happened, but to see the guy getting his face kind of melded together and like having the thing assimilate him and like crawling on the ground, like that was a really cool scene. It was like very reminiscent of The Exorcist, the spider walk.
Yep. And why the axe was in the door?
Yep.
Just plunged into the door.
Yeah, like all these like little things. I think they did a great job of and having mostly Norwegian actors, Norwegian director, writer. I thought that worked really well, like getting to tell that side of the story.
And one element of the story I thought was brilliant was that instead of doing a retread of the blood test, they figure out that, well, if this thing replicates you, it's not going to replicate your fillings. And that was how they could tell who was a thing and who was not. And it was so simple, yet so brilliant. And it wasn't a retread of the blood test.
The only problem I had with that is that that's how Mary Elizabeth Winstead figures out that the guy at the end, because the earring is in the wrong ear.
Yes.
And then now people point to, well, Childs had an earring, so he couldn't possibly be the thing. So like that, like it kind of screws up that whole debate.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like it retcons everything, and it's like
interesting, or it's true.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to ask Carpenter.
It could be true too.
That's his thing. Like, is that something that he considered? And then you have to say, well, do the comic books count? Do the video games count? Like, what counts? Like, what's canon? I kind of
exactly. No,
I like to just consider this its own thing, and I like to consider the the prequel is cool, but I like to ignore it because the whole thing with the ship doesn't make sense to me either.
Which part?
Well, the fact that the ship was up and running, and that all that heat and energy starts melting all the ice, and like everything's collapsing. But when MacReady and the guys find it, it's just like that one cutout. Like I don't I don't think it matches up. Again, I might have to rewatch the two of them back to back to see if it does. But like that seemed like it was a little inconsistent because you can't have something with that much energy. And that was the other part I didn't like. They tried to kind of show what the thing looked like. I mean, it's better than the description given in the book, which is like, oh, it had 3 eyes and red hair, like weird, and it was like blue.
At least he's not a vegetable.
Like like in the original movie. Yeah, it's not plant-based.
Right. Now, real quick, and then we're going to have to wrap this up here, but did you know, I didn't know this until the other day, that there was a quote-unquote spin-off for the thing. It's a 2015 movie called Harbinger Down with Lance Henriksen.
I've seen it.
Have you heard of this?
I've seen it. It's very very similar. I recall a specific death scene where a guy is kind of like covered in slime, almost like the Bennings thing, like when we see Bennings getting assimilated, and he falls to the ground and like all these weird tentacles sprout out of his back and start flipping around, very similar to the tentacles that come out of what's his name there after he has his heart attack, Norris.
Oh, Norris.
With all the tentacles that sprout out, that we see a couple of times, with the dog and with Norris. It's very similar. Like they find this thing packed in ice, so it's almost like whoever is the thing, like if there was still any thing left, whether it be MacReady or Childs or some of the other media is canonical. Something got away, and like they find it in the ice, and it like got onto another ship, but it also froze again, and then it just wreaks havoc on this boat. Yeah, it's really fun, and I didn't know at the time that it was like kind of like a spin-off, but I was like, this is really good. I like this a lot.
I'm going to have to check that out. I did not know that it existed.
Yeah, and plus I'm a big Lance Henriksen guy.
Oh yeah, anything he's in is good. Just same as Kurt Russell. It's like anything he's in, I'll watch. But we're gonna wrap this up quickly now. I just did want to say, I don't know if you know, I happen to have the opportunity this past summer to take my wife and my son and his girlfriend to see it at the drive-in at a midnight show up here. We live in Maine, and this drive-in around us that's been showing horror movies every Saturday night at midnight, and we saw The Thing, and we had to go. My son and I, that's like one of our all-time favorite movies. We had to go and see that.
We had that similar thing, but they didn't show The Thing. It's a place that I've gone, a theater near us, where they will do like a retro night. And one year it was Jaws and Jurassic Park, and another year it was Jaws and Back to the Future. And on the other
nice.
screen,
Was it the Mendon Drive-In?
Yes, the Mendon Drive-In.
Okay, yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I've been there before. Excellent. So, Patrick, give us your final thoughts on the film. Do you consider it scary, and would you recommend it to a younger audience?
I would recommend it. I can't wait till my niece is old enough to watch this, because I would love to introduce her to this. She actually just watched The Monster Squad over the last couple of days for the first time.
Nice.
She's 6. She just turned 6 at the end of August. So, I think she's got a ways to go before she sees this. But I think, if we kind of introduce her the way my brother and I were introduced, which is through the making of Thriller, so you get to see all the background stuff that goes on, she won't be as scared. You get to see how the sausage is made, so to speak. I think this is one of the best films ever made, not just horror, because there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of, who does what, who can I trust, who's the thing, especially that final scene. Is MacReady the thing? Is Childs the thing? Is he drinking a Molotov cocktail? Like, what's going on? Like, how does this end? And it's like that open-ended, ambiguous ending that really seals the film for me. Like, there's, like I said, amazing special effects that I don't think can be duplicated. It's just a stellar film, and I don't think that there's a flaw in it anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. You pretty much said everything that's been going on in my mind. This is hands down my all-time favorite horror movie. And I highly recommend the audience, if you haven't seen this, we've probably ruined the movie for you, but you were warned at the beginning that there were spoilers. So go out and check The Thing from 1982, directed by John Carpenter. And Pat, it was awesome having you on the show, and we'd like to have you on again sometime.
I would love to come back. Like, this was awesome. Like, I love talking The Thing. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. No problem. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.
You too.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this special edition episode of Then Is Now, called 13 Weeks of Hallowtober. If you want to chime in on today's show, please send us an email at thenisnow42@gmail.com. And you can also check out our website, havenpodcasts.com. And we have another show called The East Meets the West, where we discuss spaghetti westerns and Shaw Brothers movies. So we hope you check that show out as well. As always, please leave us a review on iTunes so that more people can find us, and spread the word about Then Is Now. Join us again next episode.
This Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Carpenter Media.
gotta be fucking kidding.